Hi, and welcome to the Eczema Podcast, where you'll learn tips, products, and natural eczema remedies from Abby, registered holistic nutritionist and founder of PrimePhysiqueNutrition.com. Here's your host of the Eczema Podcast, Abby.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Eczema Podcast, and today I have a special guest on the show. I have Tammy Bronstein, who's a medical herbalist, and she has a lot of knowledge in eczema. She's worked with a lot of different clients, plus she's also been qualified overseas in the UK, and I'm just excited to have her here so that we can ask her more about eczema and learn more as well. So welcome, Tammy.
Thank you, Abby.
I'm glad to have you on the show today. So tell me how you got into herbalism.
Herbal medicine.
Herbal medicine, yeah.
I guess would be, it's been a journey. I wouldn't say that it was a fast journey. It was really a long journey. I first was interested in herbs and herbal medicine when I was in high school, which was many moons ago at this point. But I was always interested in nutrition and using plants as medicine. And so it was a little bit of time before I actually went overseas to England when the accredited programs were available. So my first undergraduate adventure was into exercise physiology. And so I was working with clients in the health and fitness realm. And I knew a lot about herbal medicine to help them, but many of them were on medications. And they were on medications that they could not come off of, at least in the short term. So they were on things like blood pressure medications. They were on beta blockers, calcium channel blockers, diuretics, a lot of cardioactive medications, thyroid medications. And I just knew that I knew enough to help someone, but I also knew enough to possibly harm someone unless I had more clinical knowledge. And so after that course in the fitness world, I was working in the fitness world for quite some time, and about I guess 1998, I enrolled in the program in England, and hopped across the pond. It was a 5-year medical schooling through the University of Wales, and then after that 5-year course, I began postgraduate studies with some doctors from Paris, France. So it's been a journey, and I'm quite grateful to have created the opportunity, but also was gifted the opportunity to be able to do that. So
that's wonderful.
Thanks.
So tell me about your experience in working with people who have eczema.
You know, eczema is not a straightforward one cause, one answer concern.
I agree.
And it can really, when we feel great, we don't realize it until we feel not so great. And it was funny because that was a status update I posted on Facebook today, because it's really not until we feel unwell for a long period of time that it's very draining of our energy. But there are many factors, and I know that in your previous interviews you covered some of the topical applications. Mm-hmm. But it's important to remember that skin is probably the largest organ of the body, and it is a dynamic system. And so most of the time, issues with the skin are not it's not a pathology of the skin itself, it's something systemic or within the body in other ways. And it becomes expressed through the skin. So there are a few common triggers that at least I look for in working with patients who have eczema. And it's very frustrating, and it can foster anxiety, because the itchiness can be overwhelming. and it can become, as you know, cracked, and it can open, and you can get
painful.
and you can get secondary infections, which causes it triggers the need for antibiotic use, which perpetuates certain problems.
Yeah, totally
So
agree.
there's a few things that we look at, and as we spoke about, the work that I do is neuroendocrine in focus. And that's to say that we look at the central nervous system and how it regulates the endocrine system. And so that has a very profound part in how I work with eczema. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, definitely.
A little long-winded.
Definitely. So in your practice, how do you usually, I guess this is a huge question, but how do you usually treat people with eczema? What do you usually look at first?
Well, there's a few things that we look at. Obviously, we look at the nervous system, because that has probably the most dynamic impact. The nervous system, first and foremost, has an effect on our body's level of acid or alkalinity. We call that pH. And we know that stress can make the body more acidic or have a more acid balance. And acid promotes inflammation. So the first thing we look at really is the digestive system. And I know you've spoken about bowel health in the past.
Yeah.
It's a very, very popular topic when it comes to eczema. But it's not the only thing that we look at. But we do look at it because, it does alter the acid levels in each segment of the digestive system. Let's just look at the digestive system, which is one tube you have from mouth to anus. And there are segments in between each segment of the digestive system. And each one has its own optimal pH. So the mouth is where you first start digesting. It has a higher or more alkaline pH than the stomach, which is a very low pH. It has hydrochloric acid and gastric acid, and that's the highest acid point of the digestive system. Once it passes through the stomach, in the small intestine and the large intestine, the pH is more alkaline. And this is what's ideal. So it can affect the pH in each segment, but not just on a chemical level, but also on a mechanical or a physical level. By that I mean sphincter control. So you have muscles that close off each segment and prevents the contents from splashing back into the segment before. So we see this with acid reflux. When we're under stress, and that upper sphincter of the stomach, the esophageal sphincter, when it has trouble regulating opening and closing, if it relaxes too much, then the acid splashes up into the esophagus.
Right.
So the same thing happens further down the pipeline. So we look at everything from constipation or a hyperactive bowel, like chronic diarrhea. We look at digestive function, whether the food is being assimilated properly, broken down and assimilated. So the nervous system has that major effect on the bowels. And if you have splashback from one segment into the previous, it can alter the integrity of the lining of that particular segment. So you've heard of things like leaky gut syndrome and triggering allergies. And we look at, well, why does that happen? Because if your bowel lining, if the cells are supposed to be really tightly connected, the junction between your cells, that helps to contain everything in the bowel. But when the gut gets inflamed from a change of pH, those cell junctions can separate a little bit, and sometimes a lot. You can get inflammation, which causes those cells to inflame,
open up and become permeable, right?
Exactly. And so you have proteins that cross through into the bloodstream, the body sees it as an antigen and it fights it like an infection. So you have many different aspects to the bowels. So that I would say that's the first thing that we look at is stress in the environment, but also if somebody tends to be a very anxious person in general, or if they're maybe just more hyper aware of things in life. Sometimes people that have a heightened sense of awareness of everything tend to be a little more on the anxiety end of the spectrum in terms of nervous system, and that can feed the issues with pH and bowel functions.
Interesting. You're the first person I've talked to that has mentioned about, I guess, the personality side of things, about how being an anxious person and just worrying about things will actually affect nervous system health and bowel function and digestive issues as well, and which in turn affects eczema.
Exactly. But that's not the only thing that we look at, because when we talked about allergies. Now, obviously, someone who has environmental allergies, one of my patients is allergic to mold. And, you can't escape mold. Mold is in our atmosphere all the time. So there are certain people who require ongoing, consistent care to manage allergies. And we look at what is an allergy. And an allergy is really a hyperactive response to an antigen or an allergen. And so what I find that people often do is they think, oh, I have allergies, let me stimulate and boost my immune system. But they're actually well-intentioned, but they're doing themselves a disservice because you don't want to overstimulate an already overstimulated nervous system or overstimulated immune system. Right. What you look to do is modulate it. And so there are very subtle differences between medicinal herbs that have a more supportive effect without being stimulating. So there's a big difference with people who have autoimmune conditions and chronic allergies. You want to address the immune system, but you don't want to overstimulate something that's already on overdrive. Okay. So there's, it was funny because I posted today on Facebook that the devil is in the details, but it's more specifically in the subtleties. It's in very subtle aspects. And so herbs have some very subtle, gradual, gentle, but very powerful effects. But we choose them very carefully.
That's very neat. That's very neat. So what have you found successful in your practice to help treat eczema?
I would say that what helps me the most is getting to know a person on a very, very detailed level. And by that I mean we look at everything from emotional or traumatic events in their lives, things that can impact the body, sometimes not even to their awareness, but it could be anything from having had a very bad infection to maybe an emotional event in the family, to even the loss of a pet. So we look at a lot of things, I would say.
I love that because, if you see a dermatologist, they only look at you for, in my experience, very short time, like 10, 15 minutes, and then they just prescribe you medicine. They don't really look at the body as a whole when, eczema is a whole mind-body connection. So it's important that, you were telling me it takes just an hour and a half to get their whole medical history when you first meet a patient.
Yeah, I mean, when I say an hour and a half, I have to really rein myself in because it depends how complex the case is. There are times that we're talking for 2 hours, and I've had to dial that back and say, you know what, we'll cover as much as we can, and the rest of it we get over time in follow-up care. And so there are things you forget on the first time, and then as the body responds gradually, we work on cycles. When we're dealing with the endocrine system, the neuroendocrine, Even men, we work on monthly or 28-day cycles. So men and women. So anything with natural medicine, we really have to give it 3 to 4 cycles before we know fully how we're affecting it. But we usually do see things earlier. I mean, I've had people respond in 2 weeks, but that's not
for eczema?
It's but it's not for everybody. It's not everybody, but because it depends on their individual history. And again, we go back to tailoring it for your case, because your cause and effect is going to be very different than someone else with eczema. It's not, you're unique in your own your own clinical picture. So we do look at that. And you also talked not only with digestive health, with the nervous impact, but nutritionally, we know that pesticides in the foods like glyphosate or Roundup alters bowel function. They alters the flora in the gut. So we're having to supplement with probiotics more now than we ever did. Not everybody needs it, but for people who have imbalances, it can be helpful. It's not a cure-all. You have to get to the cause of why the flora is out of balance, and that could have a lot to do with the pH level or the acid alkaline level. And then we look at food allergies, because more and more people are having allergies to genetic modification. So
that's definitely true.
So it starts here, but then you look at everything around it.
Is there a specific, herbal remedy you find really helps a lot, or is that just hard to pinpoint since you have to tailor it for every person?
You and I were talking just before we started to hit the record button, and that's been a little bit of a conundrum for me in providing information to people, because I would love to rattle off a list of herbs that would be useful, but not every medicinal herb that is brilliant for eczema is ideal for that person. So I would really be doing people a disservice if I listed certain herbs that they could have a reaction to. If it would overstimulate their system, or possibly interact with medications. So it is, I wish I could. I've wrestled with that one, because I feel I want so much to share something helpful. But if nothing else, at least I can provide the concepts of what we look at, so that perhaps people can pay attention to their digestive function more. They can eat more organically grown foods, or if they're growing it themselves, they can avoid using pesticides like Roundup. And just being more mindful about their emotional body, because that does factor into it. So we do need to be a little more insightful of our reactions to our relationships with people, our relationship with ourselves, accepting ourselves and accepting certain things about our lives. The digestive system in particular responds so well to stress, because if you think about it energetically or metaphorically, what we do with our digestive system is we take in food and we digest it, and we assimilate, or we pull out what we need and we eliminate the rest, right? So we take the trash out in that sense. But the same thing with emotion and information. We take in information or situations with our relationships, and we process them. And sometimes we have a problem making peace with these situations, and we hold on to it. And sometimes that will manifest in reflux, where they can't assimilate the emotions, and so they hold it in their stomach, their upper stomach. Whereas sometimes they don't have a problem assimilating the information, but they have a problem letting go. So I had a patient who was dealing with reflux, and she had lost her husband of many, many years. And she was suffering constipation because she couldn't let go. She emotionally couldn't let go of her spouse. So it manifested in a physical way, her emotions. And so I really look at everything, because it's not just the food we put in our body, but how we put the food in. We have to eat, not eating in the car. I've suffered from it too. I'm no different than anybody else. I used to be on the road with work and eat in the car, and I suffered terrible upper digestive symptoms. And I knew better. I kicked myself in the rear end because I knew better.
Yeah,
So
I think we've all done it. So that's, yeah, it's common.
It's kind of like the wounded healer. Sometimes, just like the shaman has to suffer a great painful journey in order to have the wisdom. So we have to learn by contrast. So it's not just book learning. I have experienced some of these things myself, and I've worked on myself. Fortunately, my doctors, if I've had an issue, they were tolerant enough of my wishes to go the natural route. There have been many times I avoided antibiotics for issues traveling to England in the damp, humid environment over there, and everything from respiratory problems to digestive upset from jet lag. I mean, we're dynamic people, so make no mistake, I use my own medicine as well.
So back to your comment on emotions. Do you actually notice any commonalities with your eczema clients and the types of emotions that they deal with and go through?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I have had a new patient who was coming in for her 4-year-old daughter. And, we talked a little bit about her daughter's constitution, a little bit about her personality. And she did note that her daughter tended to be very, I would say, hyper aware of details that maybe children aren't normally mindful of.
So like a sensitive person?
Yeah, because the son, the woman's son, was a very relaxed personality, and he doesn't have any of these issues. And I noticed the mother had a very rapid rate of speech. So I had a sense that perhaps there might be dynamics in the family that I can't see. Obviously, I can only go by what someone tells me. And if someone hasn't made peace with certain things, they're not going to be able to articulate them. So that's kind of happens over time as people trust me, and I can ask more personal questions. But I have seen some people that the emotional nature factors in, whereas there are others who are transient, like they just have gone through a stressful work environment, and we work with the eczema, and when they've left that job, then the eczema
That's happened to me before too.
Yeah, so you have that aspect. There are other people, like I said, who have perhaps environmental allergies, and so it has nothing to do with their emotional.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And your herbal medicine, so it helps the body, but it also touches upon emotions and helps that as well?
I wouldn't say that per se.
Okay.
I would say that we bring mindfulness to certain emotional components, but my work really works to balance the nervous system, or support the body's nervous system. Sometimes you have things like adrenal fatigue, which can one of the symptoms or effects of adrenal fatigue is anxiety. And so what causes adrenal fatigue is different in different people. It could be, like we said, it could be their work schedule, it could be family life, it could be jet lag, it could be a combination, it could be sleep disorders or issues with sleep. So we look at the various factors that go into the nervous system.
And adrenal fatigue definitely affects eczema, because if a person is stressed and anxious all the time, they're more likely to scratch, to itch, and to flare up as well. Yeah,
because also when the nervous system is irritated, the skin can you can have prickly sensations like pins and needles. You know how if you sit too long and your
Yeah.
feet fall asleep, you get pins and needles. So that's a nervous system effect. And so sometimes people who get anxious or nervous, they get itchy just because their nerves are frazzled or they're active. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have any last words of advice for people with eczema?
I would say just to reiterate the mindfulness, to quiet down and be mindful um, uh, of their own lives, their relationships, how they respond to their friends and family and coworkers and children and animals, and just I think the emotional body is a big one, because that does affect nervous system and it does affect bowel function. I think that being mindful helps me in my work to be able to pinpoint intuitively what that person's dealing with. Not just, I mean, what I do is not just intuition. It's not just science. I mean, we do look at we look at blood work. We look at any medical tests that the person may have had done. So you have the clinical aspect, but then you have to factor in the mind and emotional body. So I think what helps me the most is someone who can articulate things that they're going through. And that helps me to match up what herbs are appropriate for them, as well as issues with medications. And, there are things in someone's life that they can't change. And we have to surrender to them and find acceptance for them. I mean, parents with children have, even if, knock on wood, the children are healthy, life is dynamic, and we have things that are stressful. And so I can't tell someone, leave your job, because that's how they earn a living. We have to learn how to manage it and navigate it. So I would love to say that everybody resolves. I have some people that resolve and then I don't see them again. I would, I miss them. I miss them, but once they're fixed, that's my that makes me feel affirmed.
Yeah.
But then there are other people who are constantly bombarded with things that challenge their bodies, and we have to support them regularly. But my goal is to get to the cause and let them manage through lifestyle.
I was reading a story about how a mother who had a son with really bad eczema, and she tried so many things to help him and it didn't work. But then she started looking into her own root cause of forgiveness, and she started writing a letter of forgiveness every single week. And in time, she found that her son started healing from his eczema just from her forgiveness. So that's amazing how emotions play such a huge role.
Yeah, emotions carry such profound energy. And that energy, if it is depleting, if it's a negative or a challenging energy, it can drain our resources and it can deplete our bodies in ways that we're not aware of. So it's fascinating to watch that and to hear of women or individuals who have that experience.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, thanks so much for being on the show, Tammy. I really appreciate it.
Being able to have conversation with you is an opportunity that I'm very thankful for. So for anyone watching, hopefully you walked away with something of value, if nothing else, but a greater picture of what factors into eczema.
Do you have a URL or an email maybe people can reach you at?
Well, right now the website is sundancewellness.com, but I am going to be releasing a new website with a new domain, but I'll have Sundance Wellness redirected. So you can get the current information there. And my email is on the website, or at least it should be. It's Tammy, Tami, at sundancewellness.com.
And just for my listeners and viewers out there, Tammy does a lot of online and phone consultations, and she's also able to mail out the herbal remedies out to you when you work with her. So thanks so much, Tammy, for having just being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Abby. I really, it's such a pleasure to connect with you.
Yeah, for sure. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Eczema Podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass it along to your friends and colleagues. Visit primephysiquenutrition.com for more articles and tips. Thanks for listening.